Hello, everyone. This is the next episode of the Tonic Accord podcast. We are going to do something a little bit more lighthearted and fun, at least in my opinion today. We're going to be talking about some of our favorite political songs and political music. Obviously, art is a reflection of reality, and much of our reality has to do with politics. So therefore, there's a lot of art that deals with politics, and some of it is quite good. Some of it's not so good, but some of it is quite good. So we're just going to talk about some of our famous, our notable, and our favorite political songs. All right, Alex, how you doing, buddy? And what are some of your tops?
What's up, man? So I'm doing all right. Just kind of staying afloat. Anyways, basically for this, I focused on two genres. I added a few other ones, but I focused on two genres, country and rap. And I focused on those two mainly because I find that country music appeals to a mixture of positive politicization. Like it appeals to a mixture of pride and nostalgia, mainly in the US, right? It talks about how it's proud and patriotic of the legacy of the US, but at the same time, it kind of helps the listener reminisce on a past time that maybe is like going away. And I personally am a huge country fan. And for me, I understand that obviously there's flawed messaging and we could get into all that. Obviously we can, but I do find that country music kind of is a soft patriotism that is also kind of a soft positivity towards politics, right? It's always like Chicken Fried by the Zac Brown Band. It's talking about, I like a little bit of chicken fried, cold beer on a Friday night, right? It's just like all this positive stuff about how like, you're just talking about the soft patriotism of a country. You're talking about, oh, I love my fried chicken. I like a cold beer. Like, I'm proud to be an American. Like, World War II, our soldiers fought and died for us. Like, it's cool stuff, man. And I think it's something that, when you're maybe feeling down or you want to get together with friends, it kind of brings you together to maybe forget some of the negativities of our country, but remember that we are an experiment that in some ways is working still and working. And, so country music to me, like three of the songs I put here, one is Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue by Toby Keith.
Right.
Definitely.
Is that the one that came out right after 9/11? That was like, we'll stick a boot in your ass, the American way. Yeah.
That's it. I'll never forget. I was with Chapman Republicans the night Donald Trump got elected, and that song everyone was blasting. Like that's like I said, a lot of countries soft patriotism. That song is hard.
That's hard patriotism. Yeah, but I remember. I mean that was at the moment where right after 9/11, the whole country was unified. Right, George Bush's approval rating was like 97%. Everyone felt like that American pride, and we're gonna come together and get through this. And I remember that song, and it even non-country fans could connect with that song because I think the whole country was feeling that way. We wanted to kick some ass, get back at who wronged us, and feel unified. And that song did that.
Definitely. So that's the one I think is one of the most powerful patriotic songs of country. And the other one I'm going to use as kind of a contradiction is the Dixie Chicks. I'm Not Ready to Make Nice.
Okay.
I'm staying in country. Obviously, I could go all day on the soft patriotism in country, but this is a group that hated George W. Bush, and I'm pretty sure they were like moderate liberals during a time when country music, that would be considered sacrilegious.
Yeah.
And so their lead singer came out and spoke out against George W. Bush, right, after 9/11 and after the kind of invasion of Iraq. And she said that this is not my president. I mean, I'm obviously not quoting her directly, but she's like, this is not who I stand for. This is not what I want. And immediately the Dixie Chicks, who went from like multi-platinum Grammy-winning artists to basically nothing. And so then after multiple years kind of out of the limelight, they came out with I'm Not Ready to Make Nice. And it's basically a middle finger to all the people who think that country music's only about being Republican. And they basically say, like, I'm not ready to make nice. I'm not ready to start over. I'm not going to back down. It's like I stand for my values. So I thought that was a middle finger to the soft patriotism. So what are some of yours now anyway? Sorry, that was a long rant in that.
No, hey, no, those are great. I mean, how can you talk about like American, like you're right. Country has always had that kind of soft patriotism, and sometimes, like you said, hard patriotism. But it does. It's a cohesive, like it is a part of American culture. There's a reason that, I mean, I think we get a couple country stars from Australia, but you could also argue Australia is pretty culturally similar to the United States. But almost nowhere else in the world do you find music like American country, and I think that says a lot. Like it's a cultural icon. It's inherently tied to American patriotism. Has that individualistic vibe. but yeah, I mean, certainly not all country is Republican, right? And talk about some early folk. One of my first was Woody Guthrie that I selected, and he has the
Great
famous
artist.
song, "This land is your land, this land is my land." What we teach, elementary school kids, you know. But what they don't mention is the second and third verses where he says, "As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on the sign it said no trespassing, but on the other side it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. In the shadow of the steeple, I saw my people. By the relief office, I seen my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me?" So, we always hear the verses about the beautiful landscapes and the natural beauty of this country, which certainly is beautiful. Um, but I also find it interesting that this guy was vehemently anti-fascist. Would definitely be considered left wing. Was charged with being was constantly called a communist, even though he identified as an American. Um, and he kind of criticizes America's love with private property, right, and the whole no trespassing. And he says, it didn't say anything on the other side. That side was made for you and me, right? And then he talks about how he doesn't feel that the government is adequately supporting their society to where people are, there's people going hungry and people standing in a line for a relief office. He says, is this land made for you and me, or who is it made for? So I always thought that was really interesting that, Woody Guthrie is kind of, enshrined in the lexicon of American folk music, but is often forgotten how political he was. I mean, even on the picture you see here, his guitar says, "This machine kills fascists." I mean, this guy was 30 years before punk, and he already has punk stickers on his guitar. So I thought that was pretty cool. Woody Guthrie is kind of my first one, and I think I'll go into the second one and then I'll hand it back. And his kind of idea of like anti-fascism, kind of more progressive leaning liberalism, eventually led into bands like Rage Against the Machine, and Killing in the Name is the one. I mean, Rage Against the Machine, probably every single song is political. I don't, they talk about war, capitalism, everything under the sun. But this one in particular is really interesting because he calls out the pervasiveness of white supremacy groups in law enforcement. And he says, the famous line that he repeats a lot is, "Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses." And certainly for much of American history, this was true. It's a documented thing that the Ku Klux Klan tried to infiltrate law enforcement wherever it could, because that would give them an edge in enforcing their worldview, and kind of give them an edge in not being investigated for their own crimes. Obviously, disclaimer here, I'm not saying that all police officers are in the Ku Klux Klan, and not
Definitely.
even and Rage Against the Machine's not even saying that. They're saying some of those that work forces, but some is way more than necessary. Necessary is zero. So anyway, it's just a super crazy song. He yells, "I don't, F you. I don't do it. They won't do it. I won't do what they tell me." Classic protest stuff. Rage Against the Machine is just cool, man. They're just like, I don't even agree with all of their messages, but they've always been solid in their beliefs. They've never backed down in their beliefs. And they were pretty early to call, like they were calling out Al Gore and Bush in 2000. They're pretty just relentless in their political views.
Yeah, man. I mean, what I would say is, I mean, I'm definitely no like giant Rise or Rage Against the Machine fan, but yeah, I mean, I think in general, music is one of the most important forms of protest, but also maybe love. And I mean, as someone who has hobbies making music myself, I think in any way it's a good way to relate your dissatisfaction. And
Yeah.
and I love the fact that more and more we're seeing artists actually have some form of a platform and people listen, and back in the day, I think that was a little less common, but more and more, especially since kind of the civil rights movements in the 60s, you just see such a voice coming out of that. And yeah, no, I mean, and actually, sadly, this is totally not related to music, but you were mentioning, KKK infiltration in police departments, and there was a current investigation that said that Sacramento, Orange County, and Los Angeles still there's still connections with KKK and
Yeah.
police. So
Especially
good.
Orange County, I buy that.
Yeah, I remember you and I went to that thing at Chapman back in the day where we talked to a guy about that. But anyways, okay, probably my favorite political song of all time. It's recent, "High Power" by Kendrick Lamar.
Nice.
And I not only love this song just for the flow, the melodies, the vibes, but I think it's probably the song that made him famous. But also, it also shows that he is a very, excuse my language, fucking intelligent person who understands like his history and where he needs to go. And like basically, like for people who haven't heard it, this song is talking about how African Americans in the United States have been put down for a long time, and it's time to finally get agency on your own and get out. And you know the song is going to be powerful when it starts with "Visions of Martin Luther staring at me." And that's how this whole song goes from there, is him basically talking to ghosts of the racist past. And you know, he's like, there's just so many insane lines, but the chorus goes, let's see, I have it here. "Who said a black man in the Illuminati? Last time I checked, that was the biggest racist party. So get up off that slave ship, build your own pyramids, write your own hieroglyphs." And you know, he's saying like the context of the song is he's saying that, you know, there's been so many attempts to get his people out of this situation, but at the end of the day, you have to kind of look inward and get off your slave ship and write your own hieroglyphs. And it's a cool saying, but like there's so many historical contexts in it. Like there's one line when he said, "Last time I checked, we was racing with Marcus Garvey on the freeway to Africa till I wrecked my Audi. And I want everybody to view my autopsy to see exactly where the government has shot me." It's like, holy crap. Like there, you know, he's relating first off the Marcus Garvey, you know, like back to Africa movements with like, you know, the civil rights movements of the time, with also talking about how African Americans have always been screwed by the state and the government. I mean, but then he relates it to how he's driving an Audi. Like it's just insane. It's just insane. And then he talks about the 80s and how he was a product of the 80s. Like, yeah, it's an amazing song. Amazing song. And another one, which I think a lot of people have heard, but would probably not think it's political, is "The Way It Is" by Bruce Hornsby.
Mm-hmm.
You know, "That's just the way it is."
Yeah.
Da-da-da, da-da-da. And it actually inspired "Changes" by Tupac, who used the same instrumental. And actually, both of these songs are about more or less the same thing, which is actually kind of interesting. Obviously, Bruce Hornsby, white 80s artist, Tupac, you know, 1990s Los Angeles African American. And so, but basically, Bruce Hornsby's one is actually about how the civil rights did something, but not enough. And so the song's about a rich businessman who speeds past the queue for the welfare office and he sneers at the unemployed. And so Bruce talks about how basically, like, well, there's a line, I'll just read it. He says, "Well, they passed a law in 64 to give those who ain't got a little more, but it only goes so far." And so he just kind of talks about how the civil rights movement was just the first step. And that's kind of crazy for a white 80s like pop piano artist, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of crazy to see. And then that inspired Tupac, who Changes, the song which uses the same instrumental, is probably one of the most influential songs on addressing like the cultural problems inside of the black community, police violence, drugs, everything.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, a lot of especially early hip hop is based around political messages, and Kendrick Lamar has certainly, you know, carried that torch. I almost thought about looking at King Kunta by Kendrick Lamar as one of those, you know, about how he feels that society does everything it can to put down a successful black man. Crazy stuff. I mean, these guys are, you know, poets, like a real, you know, again, rap is rhythm and poetry, and Kendrick Lamar is a true poet. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some, like, you know, rap songs that I really think that are really good on the political. I mean, there's obviously like the big ones that I think a lot of people, like your average suburban mom, might know are "F the Police" by the MWA. There's "Fight the Power" by Public Enemy. But there's a huge slew of you know, there's an almost infinite amount of political rap songs, especially from the 80s and 90s. You know, Too Short talked about living in the ghetto and what that means, and how welfare struggles to even keep people afloat. All sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, I think you bring up, like, Kendrick Lamar, certainly for anyone that doesn't listen to a lot of hip hop, for whatever reason. Kendrick Lamar I think is a great starting point to see some true artistry and really impactful messages packaged in a fun to listen to way. No doubt. No doubt. Let's see. Let's see some more on my list. I put.
Really,
Oh, go ahead.
really, really quick. While you're on rap, I just want to ask you this. Do you think that our generation is so much more sympathetic to kind of the protest movement now? Because we did grow up listening to rap like this, where we've kind of heard about the struggle, obviously secondhand, but we have grown up hearing, artists talk about these struggles.
I uh I think so. I don't think you could say for everybody, right? I'm sure. There's certainly a lot of people that listen to music and don't look much into it. Um, you know what I mean? But I think you're right. I mean, I certainly was exposed to like I think consuming media has led me to like realize things about what is it like to live like in '90s Compton. Like I had no idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the power of any kind of artistic media or just media, right? Stories, books, documentaries, film, music. If you can somehow put someone else in your shoes or put yourself in someone else's shoes, I think that's super powerful. And I think you're right. I think there's probably a lot of people like me that listens to hip hop from the black community and learns something about the black community.
Yeah.
I also think though there's a lot of kids that listen to music from the black community and don't learn anything.
True.
You know what I mean? It's probably the kids that, you know, I don't know. I think some people just view it as entertainment, and there's a lot of hip hop that is just entertainment, right? Like the Migos aren't exactly a political group. You know, they just talk about getting money. That's okay. That's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
Not everyone has to be a conscientious rapper, but certainly someone like Kendrick Lamar, though, is someone that I think does do exactly what you said: is cross cultural boundaries and bring a message and an incredible storytelling to people that might not have thought about his perspective before.
Definitely. And no, I mean the Migos, I would actually argue because the fact that the Migos talk about kind of the crime situations in Atlanta and some of these cities in the South, arguably they are also a product, I would say that. But it's a whole other conversation. But yeah, keep going on your list. Sorry.
Oh no! I mean, I hear what you're saying, right? Like they're probably reflecting an environment that they lived in. But
Yes.
that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily make it political, right? Like I don't think the
No.
Migos have gone to endorse something or call for change. They're just kind of reflecting on what they grew up in,
Right.
which is still valid, and you know, and
What you could say is kind of soft, like the opposite of soft patriotism is what the Migos are. Like I was talking about, soft patriotism in country. I would say the Migos are almost like the opposite of that. It's kind of soft, systematic problems. I don't
oh
know.
yeah, maybe yeah, I mean, maybe we're looking more into it than they are. I don't know. Maybe they're really
Probably.
opinionated. They could be, but at least in their music, you know, it's pretty much just about that Southern trap culture,
Yeah.
which is fine. Um, you know, I have you ever seen the video of them? I think it's like a Vice video where it's like I mean, it's like me. It's like a skinny white kid, you know, from a city who goes out and hang out with the Migos in Atlanta, and they go to their like mansion in Atlanta in the hills, and they're strapped. Like they have, you know, AR-15s, ACOG scopes, but they're all legal. They're like, well, it's all legal in Georgia. Like we stay strapped, just like everyone else on
Well,
this block.
well, yeah. Well, yeah. That's that noisy Atlanta, right, or something
Yes,
where
yeah, I think it's
where they
noisy.
like, yeah, because I'm pretty sure like if it's the same documentary, that's the one where they say like they have to record and they have like an armed militia basically because of how wanted they are, amongst gangs in the region, from back in their, I guess, pre-famous days, and so that's why I say there's a bit of soft systematic problems is you have these guys who are trying to get out of it, but they're still stuck in these kind of cultural ties, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, yeah, even like the non-conscientious rappers pretty much always talk about dodging police or dealing with police in
Right.
some way or another. So yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
there. Again, it's like it's hard to reflect reality without kind of having some kind of perspective on it. Um,
definitely.
okay, yeah. So back to the list. No,
Yeah, sorry.
no, I don't mind the tangent at all. I could talk about music and culture all day, so I don't mind tangents at all. But back to the list. I also chose Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On." This was kind of an anti-war song, but also kind of just, you know, he wanted to bring some more love and unity into the American conversation and less division, right? And he says, lines here, Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war's not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. We've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see, what's going on. So it's incredible how, this was obviously in the anti-war era, kind of height of Vietnam, late 60s. You still had civil rights movements going on as well. It's just crazy how something like back then, I think, still applies to today, right? Like, talk to each other to find out what's going on. Don't punish others, and try to be nice to people. Be nice to your neighbor. For love can only conquer hate. So I thought this was super good. But the reason I put it in the political category is Marvin Gaye was pretty openly anti-war, and he says, you see, war is not the answer. And this was, again, at the height of that anti-Vietnam War movement, which sparked a ton of good music.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to me, and I think it again proved to us that history is cyclical.
Yeah.
We think we move on, but progress is arbitrary. It's hard to really pinpoint. And yeah, I mean, when you sent me those lyrics, because obviously I've heard that song, "What's Going On, What's Going On." Sorry, I suck at singing, but I had to do it. But for years you hear that song, but sometimes you pick up on the rhythm and the vibes more than what's actually going on. and yeah, it's always mind blowing to me how cyclical the message is, and it does. I mean, it does make me feel bad that we really haven't changed that much, but.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting. And the last person I'm going to say is Run the Jewels.
Oh,
more
hell
specifically. Yeah, I remember I went to a concert back in college and saw them, and great artists, great artists. But Killer Mike, I think, is such an influential person. I remember back in I guess it was early June, right after George Floyd was murdered. He was one of the people that was kind of at the forefront of telling people, don't just burn down your community. He's like, let's kind of get together and get a strategy towards this. Remember, he was like, let's just not just destroy everything for the hell of it. Let's like figure out and strategize and, get this going. But, all their music is also pretty in the forefront of that. I mean, they have a song called Reagan, which, kind of talks about Ronald Reagan's tenure with black communities and kind of the war on drugs and kind of that drug crisis that hit 80s black communities. And right. I've always found Run the Jewels fascinating. So I if anyone hasn't checked them out, check them out. But if you don't like rap, look at Killer Mike on Bill Maher, on Joe Rogan, on CNN. Like, he has so much to say. And he's someone who I think can appeal to both sides, mainly because he's a gun owner.
Yeah,
and he's
like
kind of a
Second Amendment. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's a Bernie. I think, as I recall, he endorsed Bernie, and don't maybe fact check me on that, but as I recall, he was a Bernie guy, but also he does have kind of some tendencies of being a libertarian. So I think he's a important person in the movement, and he's someone that I respect full-heartedly. So I couldn't leave out Run the Jewels.
Certainly, man. I love Run the Jewels, and yeah, highly political group. Killer Mike, super outspoken, but like opinionated and sticks to his guns. Yeah, they're really cool. Have you, man, they have a new one. Their new album just dropped this year, and they have this one that's like, gosh, it's like, I don't even want to play it too loud in the car because it's like, but the chorus is basically like, look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar. Like, they're basically saying, like, you think we're past our history? Like, we still have slave masters on our money. And I was like, man. You know what I mean? Like, talk about cultural symbolism, and like talk about our reverence for the past. Like, we are still dealing with these things. Like, yeah, he's right. There are slave masters on our money. Like, what does that mean? What is that? How does that? Like, how do you explain that to a black kid? Like, oh yeah, here's a $5 bill. Go buy some bubble gum. Like, who was that? Who is that on the money? Like, oh well, he was a founding father. He did own slaves, but so obviously, that's all, we can go way down that conversation. But just to point out like that, they are aggressively political, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. No, I actually haven't listened much to their new album.
Oh, it's good, dude.
Yeah, I know. I need to, but it's the same reason why I watch rom-coms lately. I just like, we do this podcast and with like research and stuff on the side. Like, I don't need to listen to music that makes me feel angry as well.
Yeah,
and I know,
get away from it for a while.
yeah, we're going to get someone who's going to tell me I'm complacent and silence is violence. But sometimes you do need to just
100%.
center a little bit.
100%, dude. You have to disconnect from this stuff sometimes because it does drive you crazy.
It does.
Yeah,
it
but
does.
Hell yeah on Run the Jewels though, man. You've got some good picks. What was I was gonna do? I wanted to give a shout out to a death metal band. I imagine you probably haven't heard of them, but they're a band called they're a band called Cattle Decapitation, and I know it sounds like a joke. It literally sounds like something out of a parody, but these guys are their most recent album is called Death Atlas, and it's a themed album literally about how humanity is running itself into the ground. How we're not paying attention to climate change. We're not paying enough attention to inequality and poverty and mass migration, and that we are literally running our planet into our own death. And the whole thing is about I think it's called, I'm going to butcher it, it's like the Anthropomorphine extinction. It's like what scientists are calling like we're entering the realm of the end of humanity based on the way we're...
The Anthropocene or whatever it's called.
And the Anthropocene extinction, right? And they've touched on this theme for a couple albums, but their most recent album is super good death metal, if anyone likes death metal. But the messaging is all about how we are just being so reckless with the way we live and the way we exert energy on the planet that we are heading towards our own death. And it's the Death Atlas, right? It's like a skeleton holding up a burning world. And they even have a song on that album called Bring Back the Plague, which was written in 2019. Yeah, crazy. And they talk about how they're obviously trying to shock a little bit, right? They're a death metal band, but they talk about how we might need some natural selection to thin the herd, or else we're all gonna die. Crazy. I'm not endorsing that idea, but I'm just saying I just thought that was really interesting that I think for a genre that is sometimes viewed as just kind of silliness and just it's just whatever, it's just ghouls and goblins. This is a band that's actually trying to promote a really serious message about the way humanity is heading.
Oh yeah, metal, and obviously metal's changed a lot. I'm a big fan of more 80s 90s metal, but sure. I do find there's actually there's a lot of nuance in what these artists talk about. Yes. And I actually do remember, what is it, Cattle Mutilations, that's the name of the group.
Cattle Decapitation.
That's what it is. Cattle Decapitations. You showed our roommate Cole and I freshman year of this band, and they're the vegans, right?
Yes, that's part of the irony of their name is they're all like vegans and they're super environmentalists.
Yeah, man. I do remember you showing us them, and not my forte music wise, but sure. I respect it. And I'm just gonna leave with one more. Beds Are Burning by Midnight Oil. Everyone hears that name, they probably don't remember it, but it's like, how do we sleep when our beds are burning? That one?
Okay.
Big Australian hit. But it's funny, their lead singer and frontman is Peter Garrett, who's now a hardcore Australian politician. Like he was an MP, and like he's been hardcore politician since the 80s when this song was #1 around the world. And this song, I thought it was always just kind of sex, blah, 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 fun, beds are burning. I don't know, like whatever the connotation that has. But it turns out it's about the Aboriginal people, which are called the Pintupis. And it's a call they were being oppressed and couldn't go back to their homeland. And they've been put on these reservations. And this song, Beds Are Burning, it's basically a call to action amongst the Australian people, which was, how do you sleep when our beds are burning? Like, and one of the lines is, it belongs to them, let's give it back. And so great catchy pop song, much like Bruce Hornsby's That's Just the Way It Is, that actually were stronger than you would think. I think people sometimes hear pop music and just go, just another sugar coated song, but you never know.
That's a really cool one. I didn't know about that one at all. That's super fascinating. Hey, Sir Goshawk, what's up, man? He loves the song Just the Way It Is as well. Yeah, so we were just talking earlier in the episode about how it's about, what did you say? It was a rich person driving past a welfare line and laughing at him?
Yeah. So I believe Bruce Hornsby's basically just like personifying someone like him who's driving by and kind of criticizing people who are desperate and want more. And, it's actually talking about that's just the way it is. Like, it's talking about, yeah, we've changed a lot, but there's still so much to do. And he's like, yeah, well, they passed a law in 64 to give those who ain't got a little more, but it only goes so far.
Right. Well, certainly. So super cool. I mean, I love music and I love politics, so a blending of the two is always fun. That's probably going to wrap up today's episodes. So if you did like the podcast on Twitch, give us a follow. We do we do like one stream session a week for now, but we do record 2 episodes. If you're catching the end of the stream right now, these will be our first episode, which talked about, vigilante justice in the wake of the Kenosha shootings. That's going to go on YouTube soon, as well as this one, the second episode we recorded, which is on political songs, will go on YouTube as well. So be sure to check those out. Find us again at Twitch, YouTube, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and a plethora of third-party sites. And if you do like what you see, drop a follow, drop a subscribe, and leave a comment. We love to hear your opinions, even if they don't agree with ours. We want to hear opinions, and we want to have that interaction with our followers. So thanks again, guys. We're going to wrap up this episode here, and take care.
Take care.